As any fan will tell you, science fiction isn't about the future, it's about now. Sometimes the metaphor is more obvious than other times. Another Britain, one where 40 years ago a spacecraft crashed into the North Sea carrying human-like aliens. Now, after the culture shock and possibilities, those visitors and their descendants are forced to live in a walled ghetto, regarded with fear and disdain by the indigenous population. This is the setup for the aliens, and it's where we arrive to talk about very British futures. Hello, and welcome to a brand new season of Very British Futures. It's a pleasure to be back making this podcast again, and we have plenty of programmes to talk about in this second season. I'm Gareth Preston, and this time I'm joined by two of the free hosts of the highly recommended Tripods cast. Rebecca Ray is an old friend of this podcast, having previously discussed Knights of God, Star Maidens, Star Cops and Outcasts. Danny Ray, on the other hand, is making her debut. So, welcome to the podcast.
Hi. Hello.
How are you feeling?
Good, thanks for asking me back, Gareth. Glad you're not sick of hearing from me.
And thank you for inviting me.
Always a pleasure. I was a big fan of Tripods cast. I thought it was a really slick production, and always enjoyed your conversations. So It's great to have you along.
Thank you very much.
The Aliens was first broadcast on E4 in 2016 and ran for one season of 6 episodes. Channel 4 had recently had a popular and critical success with their robot drama Humans, and had hopes that this new series would continue the trend, promoting it with a viral campaign amongst other E4 adverts. Written and created by Fintan Ryan, who'd previously written episodes of In the Flesh and Hustle, amongst other dramas, it was produced by Clerkenwell Films, who were then best known as the makers of another Channel 4 fantasy series, Misfits. Filmed at the Nu Boyana studios in Bulgaria, popular with makers of urban action films, and starring Michael Socha, Michaela Cole, Jim Howick and Michael Smiley. As ever, a warning that our conversation is going to include spoilers. So, Rebecca, would you like to sum up the story of the aliens?
Lewis Garvey is a border patrol guard at Troy, a walled ghetto built to keep in aliens who landed here 40 years ago. Trouble starts when Lewis's drug-dealing sister gets in trouble with an alien fur deal gone wrong, and Lewis has to cross the border where he encounters his dream cam girl, Lily Hot, and secrets are revealed.
What did we think of the aliens overall? I shall start with Danny.
I really enjoyed it. I quite liked the comparisons that you could get to essentially racism, because obviously the aliens don't look any different than humans. There's nothing really that differentiates them, not by sight alone anyway, and yet they were treated so horribly. Like, I know, like I was going to say, they're a less than species, but yeah, that's what they were treated like they were less than the humans, even though there's nothing really saying why they would be. But I liked that comparison to today's kind of world.
Yeah.
And that, yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I got into it. By episode 4, I was like, yep, this is clicking now. I think that's the turning point at the end of, is it episode 3 when, Lewis meets Antoine and they get together at the pub? I think that's a turning point in the show when it really kicks up and becomes like, yeah, this is really good now, I want to see more. And I was quite sad, actually, by the end that it was cancelled. And it's a shame. I think it mustn't have been marketed very well. I mean, none of us watched it at the time. This is my first time watching it, because at the time it was just, all the promotion was a bit off-putting.
Yeah, I was in a similar boat. I was kind of aware of it, that it was happening, and I think part of me think, I'll try and catch that, and then there's too many shows on at the time, and plus as is often the way, if I don't hear any kind of buzz about an episode, about a series,
you forget about it.
Tend to assume the worst, really. And in the case of the Aliens, it seemed to come and go without leaving much of a ripple, really. Which is one of the reasons I thought it'd be interesting to talk about it in this show.
Yeah.
My main strike is, and we'll get onto this in the show, is that for a show that's called The Aliens, it doesn't really exploit its kind of unique selling point very much. It feels very much like Shameless, and that's kind of a problem because we already have a Shameless on the schedules. This one feels very much like almost a clone show to that.
So it's the same problem as Outcasts, really. Almost like it's ashamed to be sci-fi.
It wanted to be all down with the kids and with all the drugs and the sort of the swearing and the drinking.
There was a lot of drugs in it. This is very much a Channel 4 sci-fi. It is so full of the usual cliches of drugs, sex, violence, swearing. I think that's another reason why I didn't watch it at the time, because I was kind of like, I'm bored of this now. It looks like Misfits, and we've had Misfits.
I'll be honest, I don't remember any of the viral campaign. I don't remember any promotion for this show. Like, I know about it after the fact. I couldn't have told you at the time they were going to be making this new series. So that's probably another reason why it didn't do well, because as an average viewer, I had no idea about it.
In some ways, there's room for a series that's, it sounds a bit cliche to say it's coming from the streets. There's an interesting interview with Michaela Cole I read where she said that one of the things that attracted her to doing this was that it wasn't, in her words, about posh people fighting demons, which I think was a bit of a Harry Potter sort of a reference. So like Misfits before it's got that kind of quite gnarly and very British. I think that's something else I like about it. It has a very British sense of humour, and it can be quite funny. It's quite a misanthropic show. I'm interested in what you think in terms of the characters, isn't that it's hard to find anybody really to root for.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of unlikable people in this show. I mean, even Lewis, the main character, at the beginning, he changes though, doesn't he? Because at first he's very prejudiced against the aliens, which they call Morks, and he does find out he's half alien and starts... But he's still even difficult at first then, even not wanting to engage with Dominic, who wants to be his friend, an alien working at the border. And
I quite like that, though. I like that the characters, I'm going to say it's got that gritty realism about it. Like Michaela said, that it wasn't just like posh people fighting demons. I feel like that's exactly what it is. It's real life, working class people who have been brought up thinking certain things. They're not going to just change overnight. It will take time. I like that it deals with that. I like that, he's still struggling. Even by like episode 5 and 6, he's still struggling with that thought process.
Yes.
And like even when his sister is like, when she, like it's episode 5 or 6 when she's like being arrested, and she's just like, well, I'm not going to let him know about you, but she's still saying it in quite a derogatory way about how he's half alien, half human.
Yeah. Well, she started coming round, because when she got off the drug, she said it was like she was seeing clearly for the first time, working with the aliens and saying they're not actually that bad. And then the dad flips off at her and goes off on this racist, xenophobic rant.
And then, it cuts back to her being with the person that she said, the alien that she mentioned wasn't that bad, and distancing herself from her. And I think I like the realism that these people are, they're seeing, they're trying to be better. And that's one thing I do like about Lewis. He's constantly trying to be better. He's in a bad situation. He's in a family that's, that are struggling financially, and they're in this crappy kind of existence, but he's still trying to better himself and his family. He's trying to better his sister, who's a drug addict. He's trying to do the best. He might not be successful at it, but his heart's in the right place.
It shows us no easy answers, and it kind of resists any kind of packed sort of solutions or ending. Probably one of the best examples of that is the character of Truss, who's a a co-worker of Lewis's, and he's a real nasty piece of work.
Yeah.
Absolute bigot who enjoys torturing and belittling the aliens at any opportunity. And then he ends up on the run as a fugitive within Troy.
Yeah.
Now, I think a lot of dramas, particularly I think American dramas, would have gone down the route of this experience changes him and he learns to some, if not have a complete 180-degree change, then at least kind of appreciate that humans and aliens are a lot more similar than he thought. But it doesn't, and he remains an absolutely dyed-in-the-wool racist right up to the end.
Yeah.
So even when he's dying.
And trying to find ways to blackmail Lewis as well. Screw him over with the secret recordings, even after they'd been through all that and Lewis had tried to save him.
In fact, he makes, I thought, and this is a good example of you give villains good arguments, which I think is always a good rule for writing, in that at one point, after his latest kind of round of insults towards Lewis, and Dominic says, hey, that guy just saved your life. He says, no, he didn't save it. He didn't want to see me get shot in front of him, which I thought was actually quite a perceptive comment on Lewis. I think one of Lewis's big problems is that he keeps vacillating. He
does, like the pub, going to the pub with Antoine, and suddenly he's all into it, and the next day he's like saying to Antoine, I want to get work for you, and the guy's like, you're not ready for any of this. It's like, why is this sudden flip going on? It was very quick to change.
That's it. If he doesn't sound pretentious, he is somewhat like Hamlet in this, in that he never really commits himself to any particular course of action throughout it. Instead, he keeps making these very emotional snap decisions rather than sticking to something, and consequently, there's a good argument that's saying that he causes a lot of the pain to other characters all around him.
Well, I think it's partly to do with Lily Hots, because she's this cam girl who he's fancying, and he keeps paying to see her take her clothes off every night. And of course, she's an alien, but he doesn't know that at first. And then everything she does, she's like a double agent almost. She's always playing both sides, but it's all to her own ends, and she's wanting to climb up the ladder. And she does say at one point she's a product of Troy, and I agree with that. She's someone who's had to learn to survive and get by. But it makes her, again, difficult to like as well, because she's doing all these things and seems like 1 minute she's on someone's side, then she's on another, betraying you. Is she betraying you? Is she playing clever games? And you're never quite sure what to think of Lily Hots. And that's messing with Lewis's head as well, because he's totally in love with her. But then she does things that are terrible to him.
Might be controversial. I really like her as a character. I like the fact that she's playing all these people. Her best way of surviving is coming out on top, and her best way of doing it is to play people against each other for her gain. She's looked at the game, she's looked at the system, she knows how to play it, and she's not apologetic. She's very much, do you know what? Everyone's out for themselves, so am I. And I don't blame her in one little iota, because she's wanting to better herself, and that's the only way in that system and in that world she can do it. Yes, it's not very nice. Yes, she's being very selfish, but it's a dog-eat-dog world, and she's out there going, nah, I don't care. I need to better myself, because if I don't, someone will walk all over me. And I think I like the fact that she's a very strong female character doing that in such a wide classes, even in the aliens world, a very male dominated world.
She's a femme fatale.
Yeah, and I love it. I just think good on you, because you're doing what you can in your situation, in your circumstances.
Because they have no access to education. Trapped in Troy, they have no access to things like education or job centres or anything to better themselves, and they are ghettoised.
Yeah, I think she is a classic femme fatale, straight out of 40s noir kind of films, and she's
very independent.
Very independent. She's probably the best character, and you never, right up to the end, you can never quite trust it. You can never know if she has. In fact, often turns out she does have another game going on behind the one that she seems to be playing.
Yeah.
In fact, that it comes a bit of a shock when a couple of times it seems she doesn't have a plan, or that she is making it up as she goes along. Thanks to also a great performance from Michaela Cole, who's a very... This is the first time I've seen her kind of properly in a...
She's in Black Mirror. Yeah, she's been in 2 episodes of Black Mirror. She was in USS Callister as the comms officer on the ship.
Now that's one of the episodes I haven't seen yet, which is shocking. I haven't seen the Netflix Black Mirrors.
Yeah. And she was in another one. I can't remember which off the top of my head.
But it's precise, and I can understand why she was being talked about as a possible future Doctor in Doctor Who. And since we're talking about Lewis, we should mention Michael Socha, who's very good at playing blokes. I
like Michael Socha. He's been in stuff like Being Human and Our World War. He was good in that.
Mm-hmm. But you know what I mean?
Yes, we know what you mean.
He plays bulky blokes.
Yeah. Bulky blokes. Yeah, I was reading he auditioned to be in Misfits as well, in the role of Nathan, which starred his sister.
I can imagine that. But he's got such a fantastic face. In a way, in some ways, it's very nice. His character is the opposite of whereas with Lily, you often can't read her and you don't know what's going on. You always know what's going on in Lewis's mind.
Oh, you do, yeah.
Because he's got such an expressive face.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that sometimes he'd be saying something and his face would be saying something completely different. And you'd know that's what he was really thinking.
Yeah.
I do enjoy that. As somebody who also has a face that says exactly what I think, no matter what I say, I really enjoy when you see it in other people, because it's like, yeah, I know that feeling.
Sort of making up the sort of central trio, we also have the alien character of Dominic, who works as a cleaner at the checkpoint. Throughout has an unrequited crush on Lewis, and is played by Jim Howick.
I don't know him.
Oh, he's in Ghosts.
Yes, he plays the Cub Scout leader in that, and I think he was one of the Horrible Histories people as well.
Ah, right.
But he's very funny, but he's funny without kind of losing the realism. Now, I said earlier it's hard to root for people, and
Dominic's probably the more likeable one.
Yeah, he's one of the most sympathetic ones.
Yeah.
I mean, he's.
One thing that was bugging me is, why is he so weird? Because the other aliens, because he has these strange behaviours, like he's sniffing Michael, he's sniffing Lewis, and he's like, oh, it's an alien thing, but no one else is doing these things he does, or saying the weird things he does. He seems weirder than the rest of the aliens.
Is he being more alien because he's actually doing what aliens would do, and the other aliens are acting more human-like to try and be more accepting?
Maybe.
Or is he just a weirdo, and we'll just leave it at that?
Because I noticed that's something about the aliens, is they don't really have their own culture as far as we can see. They're very familiar with human culture. They talk about things like The Colour of Money, Harry Potter, GTA.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to move into that, actually, in that very surprising, actually, just how human these aliens are. We never see any alien writing or any kind. We don't actually know what their planet is called or what their race is called.
No.
And I was curious I was waiting to be honest, for an explanation as to why they don't seem to have any kind of culture really at all.
I mean, it's kind of briefly mentioned. I can't remember the character's name, but she was part of the
Paulette.
Yeah. And she actually said about how the aliens have been brainwashed, thinking.
Yeah, she thinks that
they've been told something, but actually they call it the Ark, because actually there was a real reason behind it. And I'm just wondering if there was a series 2, because towards the end of episode 6, you have her kind of taking over, and it's that trying to change the status quo and using her group to do that. I wonder if in series 2 it would have pushed more into the aliens' history with her pushing it.
Well, she was the focus of all the promo stuff, the viral footage and stuff. It was her, Paulette, the leader of the Alien League. They did have an official website for the aliens, which is no longer accessible, but I found it on the Wayback Machine, and it's alienleague.co.uk. And I discovered on it a timeline of alien events. It says 12th of April 1977 at 6:20am, the alien ship crashes into the Irish Sea. There were 383 aliens on this ship that the Alien League call the Ark, and the aliens had amnesia, no memories. But the Alien League don't believe that's true. They think they were brainwashed. The British Air Force moved them to what they called handling centres, which were basically internment camps in North Wales, and the aliens had to live there for a few years, and they had tests run on them, interrogations. It was not nice. Then 2nd of August they were released by the government with a promise of equal rights, which were lies. Then throughout the 80s they were living in human society, but due to prejudice and discrimination, up to 75% of alien males were unemployed. This led to riots, humans attacking alien families, so it was the humans attacking aliens. Then by February 1990, the government decree segregation, established Troy, moved the aliens to it, which is 2.8 square miles big, and the aliens were forced to build the wall, and over 85 conscientious objectors were sent to prison because they wouldn't build the wall. So a lot of detail there that's not in the show, because I remember in the show you see that on the wall of the Breakfast Club, the Alien Breakfast Club, what was it, Alien Integration 1977, and that's it, and you're like, I want to know more.
Yeah, in the very first scene, when the school are there with Lewis, there's like 1990 on the back wall.
Yeah.
And some other bits and pieces, but you never really learn the history.
Yeah.
It's just an accepted fact, and it's like, okay, but I feel like we need to know some of this.
Yeah, because it was really vague, just 40 years ago, and it's like, okay, when's now, and how did Lewis, because Lewis is half alien, so it turns out his mum slept with an alien, and we're like, but they're in Troy, so we've until I saw this timeline, it wasn't clear how all this came about and how his mum could have met an alien. We didn't know.
No, it did. That's mentioned. It does mention that
they suddenly got.
Antoine said that him and Lewis's mother were together, and then the talks of the wall came about, and so that's why then she went back to normal family, because they couldn't be together, and that he knew he had a child that was half human, half alien. There is a mention of that with Antoine saying it.
Yeah, but it was still a bit vague.
It was still vague. It wasn't...
And even the detail that the ship was crash-landed in the Irish Sea in 1977, that's not in the actual show, it's in the opening titles. And it's so fast, you have to pause it, don't you?
Yeah, I'm absolutely amazed, because until you read it, I didn't know most of that, what you've just read out, and I wish I did, because that sort of answers a whole lot of questions. Well, actually, it raises a whole lot of other questions as well, and I think definitely we, as Danny says, we needed more of that in the series, and in 6 episodes there was more than enough space to fit in more of that detail about, because I was thinking that myself. Another is kind of the international side of it. Why haven't other countries, wanted to take these aliens into their own sort of
use them as workers or anything? I mean, we haven't heard. You'd think at least some countries might be saying, "Can we exploit them?" I don't know.
Yeah, I was also wondering
negative stuff, but still something.
Yeah, and that's surprising. I was also wondering if there were any. As far as it seems, all the aliens are sort of like these benighted people living in Troy. I was wondering, it's a surprise that there aren't any, because usually when you have a minority, you usually have one or two token people who sort of, celebrities basically, actors or singers or politicians or sports people, who kind of come out of that community and are the sort of visible face of that community. And
then people use that as an excuse to say, oh, but they're equal. It's like, no.
Exactly. And that is all entirely missing.
And also, to be a bit on the slightly political point of view, it was 2016. So, the UK, very much part of the EU. Why was there no EU laws?
Another obvious parallel is with the Australian transportation of, and that's why people have assumed these aliens have arrived in a prison ship, because they've got that sort of historical model in their minds.
Yeah.
I feel like as well there's a bit of a parallel to Nazis and Jews, purely because again Nazis was like that with Jewish people, saying that they're criminals and things like that when they weren't. They treat them like that, but also they were Jewish were made to wear yellow stars to say I'm a Jew. The aliens are wearing a massive yellow band that says I'm an alien, and I feel like there's very much that parallel going on there.
Yeah, and they have a curfew to get back to Troy, isn't it?
Yeah.
When they leave it, they're sprayed.
Which is very similar to
The de-licensing
Jewish,
stuff.
and Jewish population in like Germany, because they were allowed out. They were allowed out to work, but they had a curfew. They had to be back. And it did start off with the Jewish people being ghettoised and made, having to wear the stars and not being able to work and all that discrimination before they finally got, taken away to camps.
So yeah, that's a very strong image in the first episode. It's that dehumanizing aspect where they're all getting sprayed with the disinfectant.
Well, even the nickname for them, we haven't mentioned that yet, because everyone calls them Morks, which I'm assuming is referencing Mork and Mindy.
I assumed that too.
Yeah.
That was my assumption.
Yeah.
Which is it's curious. It's an interesting little bit of shorthand.
Well, I was thinking because what's his name who created the show, Fintan Ryan. He wrote scripts for In the Flesh, and in that they had a derogatory nickname for former zombies. They call them rotters.
Ah,
So maybe he got the idea from that.
it's possible.
Or maybe he just knows that's what we do as a human race. We label things and we nickname things. And
Well, people do in District 9 as well, which is a very similar product to this. They nickname the aliens prawns. I know there's definitely a theme looking at the behind-the-scenes features on the DVD. They talk a lot about going for a refugee vibe to it all, because that's the current issue that was happening when they were filming this, and talking about Trump and his walls. So they do reference those things.
Possibly. What do you think? Is it a bit too obvious? Is the metaphor too sort of in your face?
I didn't feel that. It just kind of is what it said it is to me. And
no, I liked it. I liked the comparison. It's a needed conversation. And
yeah, and that's what sci-fi's good at.
It found that conversation needed to be talked about. It found that bit and found it very well, but then decided to be more about essential. I felt like it was a very, like you say, very shamelessly in the sense that it felt like very much all of a sudden you've got one side of it being an us versus them political kind of thing, but then in the next breath it's just a lot of drug dealing, gang related stuff.
Yeah, it's very focused on that, and
Which
it's very Channel 4.
Yeah, very Channel 4, very just, I think...
One thing that occurred to me was the Alien League, which started out just handing out leaflets to people to raise alien consciousness and running breakfast clubs just to educate them on the history and challenge human narratives, because the humans was claiming that their ship was a convict ship. But there's no evidence of that.
No, that's an obvious sort of prejudice. I mean, in Britain, always probably British people thinking about Australia and.
So they start off quite mild. They're just handing out leaflets, running breakfast clubs, and then they very quickly escalate to violence, chasing after Truss. And roaming around with baseball bats, smashing up things. And I'm like, this is a very fast escalation. I'd have liked to have seen it drawn out more, but it would have needed another series to do that. Because historically that does happen with the civil rights movement, with suffrage, because you had that with the women's suffrage. You had the suffragists who just peacefully lobbied, but the suffragettes are ones who just got fed up after decades of being ignored and bills being bounced back and put aside, and eventually went, we're going to have to resort to violence. And that kind of thing happened in the civil rights movement as well. You had the Black Panthers and different groups breaking off.
Yeah, because you had one episode where they're being really, educational, helpful, trying to be the trying to change the status quo, but in a what you class as a good way. They're trying to educate, they're trying to better themselves, they're trying to do all this kind of thing. And then the next episode, it's we're gonna find him and we're gonna kill him.
Yeah, because we're doing like paper mache arcs with the kids going, "Oh, paint that blue," and then suddenly the next episode, it's like walking around posing with a baseball bat and being like, "Let him out," or "We're gonna break your knees," and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I kind of way understand it, because I think in some ways there are some criminal gangs that I kind of like that. They're sort of in some ways it's a cover perhaps, but where they see themselves as they're protecting their community and they're providing stuff that the government isn't providing. That there are examples, so I can see those two things living in coexistence with each other. I'm glad you raised up District 9, because in science there are no original stories, and science fiction has previously approached discrimination and immigration in various stories over the years, and probably the two most obvious comparisons to the Aliens is District 9 and also Alien Nation. So District 9 to me seems in some ways the closer parallel.
I think it is very similar because, again, I mean, they chose District 9 to set that in South Africa, which I guess is because of its history with apartheid and stuff. And all you're thinking when you're watching District 9 is, poor aliens, couldn't you have landed anywhere else than Johannesburg? And how awful they were being treated. But at least in that, you did get an impression from the international community that they were not happy with South Africa either in this case, and how they were treating the aliens.
That's okay. I was going to say, one of the ironies of District 9 is that the aliens are being forced to live in a ghetto, and parts of it were filmed in a real ghetto where a lot of black people were living at the time.
It was a reference to an actual name district, which was a similar number kind of thing, like District 12, I think, or something. So there is that history. It happened in the 60s, 70s, where they forced people to leave the district. Yeah, I think the difference with the aliens and District 9 is the aliens are just so alien. They have their own culture. They look different. They have a different language. Whereas the aliens, Channel 4's the aliens, they look human. They sound human. They talk English. Adopted our culture.
Because unfortunately, because of the amnesia thing, which I was not... obviously was not emphasised enough for the slower thinking viewers, you see, like myself. I was not aware of that amnesia, so that's what. But I was wondering, because if it's only 40 years, I was thinking, there's still people who were on that ship alive, and but now it makes sense. It's an interesting contrast. Alien Nation, which started life as a feature film and then ran for one season as a TV series, and then came back for 4 more TV movies, had a different take on immigration, in that there was more integration with these aliens than we saw in The Aliens. I'm beginning to wish Channel 4 had
given it a better name,
given this a more distinctive name. But in that one, that took a different view, in that you had the aliens who are called the newcomers. They're referred to rather more politely as the newcomers, and they, although there very obviously is a ghetto and there's plenty of prejudice about them, there is also more effort to integrate them.
And they also look more visibly alien as well, because they look different, and they have quirks as well, like. Is it milk that makes them drunk? Whereas in the aliens, they get high on dishwasher powder, which they call Powerball.
No, and it's the men who become pregnant as well.
Yeah, I've only seen the pilot for Alien Nation. I do need to get back to it.
It was a decent, thoughtful series. To me, I think the subtleness of Alien Nation. I think scores over The Aliens, which can be pretty...
Yeah, it's not subtle.
Blunt. There's nothing subtle about it. Every human turns out to be deeply unpleasant and prejudiced. It would have been nice to have had 1 or 2 human characters who were a bit more in the middle. So, another question I was wondering about is As I was saying, that humans in this series are all pretty horrible. Even his,
his boss, the board, they're all horrible. The border guards, even the chief. No one's sympathetic at all.
which it's to me slightly verges away from realism, and it becomes a bit too cartoony to some extent.
Yeah,
to say that every border guard is this sort
prejudice,
hideous thug.
I don't know. I mean, I agree that you'd think there'd be one or two that'd be a bit more sympathetic and a bit more understanding, but could it not just be that they come in, day in, day out, and they've become very cynical, very established in what they do and what are institutionalised in their role, and they only see the bad, they're not seeing the good, because that's what they're on the lookout for all the time. They're on the lookout for aliens, trying to do these things. That's all they're looking for. That's their mindset, because that's kind of what they've been programmed to think like.
Mm-hmm. That's actually something we haven't mentioned yet, is the aliens, one of the unique features about them is their body hair can be smoked by humans to get high. It gives off a green glow, doesn't it? We haven't mentioned that, and there's a big drug trade going on in what they call fur.
That is, we should have, because it is one of the most significant plot points of the series, that the alien hair is a narcotic, and in a way, it's almost kind of they've been forced almost into drug dealing because
they can't get work.
And it's one of their few things they can sell, as Lily points out in episode 2. Look around you, can you see any schools? Can you see any factories? So there is a sense that it's become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, I mean, look at what Trust did to Dominic, who wanted to better himself. He was working as a cleaner, and there's a job ad vacancy going on, and Dominic applied for it, wanting to move up, and Trust did a fake job interview with him just to make fun of him, and filmed it, and it was just really cruel and mean. And it took Lewis to intervene, and I think that's when Lewis did start changing a bit at that point. Starting to speak back at them all more.
Yeah, I think he sort of crossed the line there with him. And tying in with this kind of the horribleness of all the human characters who work on the border, including the chief, who seems for a while to be one of the more reasonable ones. Lewis's superior. She's just called Chief in the series, but it builds up to this lovely moment of cruelty when in the last episode Lewis makes this impassioned speech saying, it's not just gangsters, there's lots of families, and there's just people in there trying to get by, and they're in danger, and we've got to do something. And the chief just says, "You lost me when you said people." Which is...
And she's just the same as the rest of them at that point. The costume designer Molly Rowe, she talks about it, how she wanted to differentiate by using colour palettes to tell the two worlds apart. So the human side is all a blue palette, everything's blue and grim, whereas the alien side is deliberately colourful, and she wanted to create a fun identity for the aliens. So it's a bit like Corpse Bride, the living were all grey and the dead were all colourful and bright. So it seems they've gone for that kind of approach.
I have slight problems with there's a feat comes out in the interview I read with Michael Socha, with this sense of inside Troy, its life is more vibrant and kind of alive, which is kind of a little argument they sort of make, but they can't really stick with it. Even within the series, you've got, as Lewis, I think, sums up at one point when he's talking to his father and says, actually his father says this, he says, "Come on, this is like, you feel alive now, don't you?" And Lewis says, "Yeah, because there's nothing more life-affirming than dying in a hail of bullets."
It is a bit contradictory, I guess. Like we said before, Lewis does vacillate a lot. And, they're saying, the alien side is more colourful and vibrant, but it's also more dangerous. And as we've said, there's no schools, no shops. There's not really any kind of functioning society. It's all lawless, which is something they talk about a lot in the behind the scenes. They said they wanted the world needed to be believable, they argued, because otherwise you'd lose the audience very quickly. And they also talked about it being a crime drama without the procedure, because it's set in this lawless place.
I just want to mention that, do you think we see, even though it's you're seeing other characters and not every scene is necessarily through Lewis's perception, do you not think that the show is pretty much through Lewis's eyes?
Yeah.
That's why you have the colourful alien world, because it's new, it's different, it's part of him that he didn't realise was part of him. That's why he's got that excitement there, because it's something he didn't know about. Whereas the human world is just the mundane, the boring, the thing that he's trying to get better. The fact that, his dad's an alcoholic, his sister's a drug addict, you know what I mean? He's going to work and he's trying to better them, but no one else is helping him better the family. Is that maybe a reason why we see things the way we see things? Because he doesn't need to, he's never going to interact with somebody who's from a more wealthy family. He's never going to interact in that kind of side of the world. So you're never going to see that part of the human world, because you're only seeing it essentially from his eyes almost. And that's why the alien world is also more colourful, because it's more exciting, it's something new, it's different.
He also doesn't have any friends on the human side, does he?
He doesn't seem to have friends at all.
He doesn't, no.
His friends become Dominic.
Yeah, and he's resistant to Dominic at first.
Yeah.
But eventually he comes out and says, you're my best mate.
And then, in typical Lewis fashion, goes back on it. As
Yes.
it appears that Dominic is not about to die.
Dominic is fairly loyal, despite Lewis completely pushing him off pushing him away a lot of the time.
He is. There's a sort of dog-like devotion going on there.
Although I guess for Dominic it must be the most exciting thing that's happened to him in a long time,
And perhaps because he's not a criminal alien in how he is, he's probably thinking, well, I'm wanting to be friends with a human, and he probably might understand the hurdles that the society have put in place for Lewis, and he's just letting him come to terms with it in his own terms. He might be more forgiving that way.
In the behind the scenes documentary, they were talking about how Lewis and Dominic were meant to be like the odd couple, and they were going for this buddy dynamic with them. Yeah, no, because Dominic does a lot of the driving in this, and you notice how all the cars and stuff they have is really old. They're all cars from like decades ago, aren't they? And which brings me on to something I wanted to mention, which is they're all wearing shell suits, which are obviously, I guess, rejects, hand-me-down, second-hand, or whatever people in Britain don't want. And it just reminded me, because they're all dressed like Nico Bellic in GTA 4, like all the Russians and Slavic gangsters, and the shell suits, which may be deliberate, because they do seem to be a bit like Misfits, seem a bit obsessed with GTA, because in every episode and in the opening titles you see a GTA game, San Andreas, and it's just showing that no one's actually seems to be playing it. It's just showing the main character on the beach.
It's not even showing the main character, it's just from the main character's eyes.
Yeah,
it's from literally a beach.
Yeah, it's just a beach.
Yeah.
And they just watch it all day.
That is quite a very striking scene. That's one of my favourite scenes. That I think this it shows in some ways the utter poverty that they are in, both literal and sort of cultural. This is considered one of their most tranquil places. And it's like I say, just watching this view of the ocean from Grand Theft Auto 4. In fact, there's a bizarre sense that that Grand Theft Auto 4 has been their Bible. It's their main way of learning about, it seems, human civilization almost.
Yeah, because one thing we haven't mentioned is the gangs, because in a big plot point in the Aliens is we've got Troy is being run by a gang which deals in fur, and it's run by this guy called Fabian, and he's total, I guess, gangster wannabe, and he's doing that whole lifestyle thing of drugs and sex and stuff, having orgies. And then Lewis finds out his dad's an alien. He's in prison. He's called Antoine Berry, played by Michael Smiley, and breaks him out. And he's basically Fabian's rival gang leader. When he comes back, it starts a gang war.
Tristan Gravel, who plays Fabian, is a fine comic monster.
Yeah.
And that he initially, because he seems a bit of an idiot, really, he initially can seem quite funny in his way, and then he'll do something hideously violent to someone. And one of the revelations that his way of bringing up his son is they have a daily paintball session where he fires paintballs at his son to try and toughen him up. That's another kind of striking scene, and he's a sort of horrible monster. And certainly initially, Antoine seems like the better vet because Michael Smiley plays him very calm all the time, and he seems quite philosophical kind of vibe.
He also seems to gives off this vibe of he's in control of the situation all the time. He knows what he's doing, even though he makes out at first he doesn't want to get back into that stuff. He does, and he just seems to have that vibe of he knows what he's doing and he gets them out of these situations all the time.
I really like Antoine, but that's because I'm biased, and I like Michael Smiley quite a lot. I think he's a great actor. But yeah, I very much what Rebecca said. He has this level of control. He knows what he's doing. Like you say, you give him a task, the job will get done. There's no mess with him. There's no kind of thing. Whereas Fabian, like you say, has a very almost chaotic, doesn't really know what he's doing, like vibe about him. Like kind of just stumbles into it rather than has a clear plan. I like that there's that thing, like you say, it's very GTA. It's very much probably is what they've without them saying it, probably is what they've actually learned for human interaction.
Yeah, I was just thinking actually, because I just remember now, yeah, Antoine reminds me of some GTA characters, because in GTA 4 you've got Dwayne who comes out of prison, because people think, people who don't play GTA think it's glamorising violence, and anyone who's played GTA knows it isn't, because the characters you play in it, encounter in it, they often don't have happy endings. Characters you play will probably get killed in later games, and it can be quite shocking and brutal, because you're like, oh my god, that character spent all those hours with, it's just died.
My GTA observations of the beach, and it's a sad fact that they're enclosed into this ghetto. They can only go out to work, and that the only place they'll ever actually experience a beach is watching it on a projected screen from a video game. And they actually, like I say, that thing like I said about tranquility before and the peace. There is that moment in there when they're all there and they're having a bit of an argument, and you actually see one of the background characters turning around and look at them as if to say, "Shut up! This is meant to be peaceful." It is quite sad and harrowing, really, to think that's what that's normal for them.
That is quite tragic. Well, fairly sad and tragic.
Looking back, one area we haven't really covered back in the wider world outside Troy is Lewis's family. In the first episode, when he refers to his family and he's talking to Lily on the webcam, he describes them as they're just a bunch of horrible people. And early on in the series, you'd be tempted to agree with him.
Yeah, I mean, especially Holly, because she's a total drug addict, a junkie, and a dealer at the beginning, and it's her dealings that go wrong that triggers all these events that happen, and she just seems like you're not convinced she can get clean, but she does actually make an effort, so you do start liking her. And there's stuff unresolved about her because she gets arrested, she gets busted on a drug deal.
And of all the characters, she probably goes on the biggest journey, emotion. That she starts off, yes, this utterly self-centered character who's in some ways rather like Lily. She's trying to use other people, but she's not very good at it, and which is why she ends up losing everything ultimately.
Yeah, like her son.
There's quite a funny bit in the first episode when it looks like that all three of them are going to be killed execution style by some gangsters, and she makes the plea that you should let one of us go to kind of spread a message, like myself.
Yeah.
But by the end of it, she actually does quite a noble thing in keeping his secret.
Lewis's secret, yeah. So she ends up going to prison. Well, she's got the prospect of going to prison.
And I did feel sort of sorry for her in the scene where she's trying to talk to her estranged son. You know, even though quite understandable why he's been taken off her, because her parenting skills aren't the greatest. But you still can't help but feel for her when she's trying to talk to him, and he's just kind of brushing her off.
He's not even really paying attention to her at all. He's too busy because she's trying to talk to him through a chain link fence, and he's at school, I think, and playing football, and he's just not registering she's there, to be honest.
He does register she's there. He's ignoring her because of the way she is. He's probably just thinking she's an embarrassment. And I don't want anything to do with you.
Well, yeah, she was even taking drugs in front of him, and she's like, "Oh, he don't know what it is."
And again, I think this is a nice little bit of written. We sort of have an idea of, in a way, why she has become the person she has become is because their human dad, Lewis's human dad, her real dad, is not that great on the parenting either. He has his own problems.
Hard to say, because he was supportive of his kids.
Yeah.
You could tell he loved his kids.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he was a very troubled man himself. He was an alcoholic. Yeah. And there's no real reason, you're never given an actual reason why he's an alcoholic, what's caused it. I mean, there's the assumption of the fact that his wife dies, but you don't know when she dies.
No, and...
or what she dies of.
I think there was a scene towards the end when he's meeting Holly and visiting in prison, and she's asked for him for clothes to help her prepare for a court date, and she's like, "It's just a bag full of socks." He says, "That's clothing."
Yeah, he's an inept father. He's just inept at the job, but he still cares. He still wants to put the effort in. He just doesn't know how.
Yeah, although Holly does mention that growing up, the parents were always talking about Lewis being special. Lewis is a special child. He's going to be important and stuff. But they never. I don't know. Maybe she feels a bit.
I mean, to some extent, she's an unreliable narrator. But I think in the case of Niall, it's not that he's not bad, man. He's just he's a weak man, unfortunately, because of his alcoholism and his general chaotic approach to life. As a result, there's that scene where he sees Lewis being threatened by Fabian, and he just kind of quietly disappears.
You get the thing after Lewis finds out about his biological dad is an alien, and everyone's talking about him breaking him out and meeting him, and Lewis is resistant to that, and he starts to try and do some bonding with Niall, his human dad, and it doesn't go so well because they do go shopping together and play games, and again Lily Hawk shows up and totally distracts him from attention from his dad while he's in the middle of that and leaves him for her.
Well, darkly funny bit that at one point Lily turns up at Lewis's house and introduces herself as Lewis's girlfriend. To Niall's amazement, because as he said, I think he says something like, because she is completely out of your league. Yes. I don't know what you're doing with this guy. So.
I just love the face Lewis has that Michael Socha is doing. It's just this kind of disbelief, but also, gosh, he's here. He's just quiet the whole time. Everything is done with his eyes. I love that moment.
Yeah, he's very good at expressive acting. He knows how to act with his face. He uses his entire face. Doesn't say a word, but yet you go through a range of emotions with him, and you know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, this goes from disbelief to, "Gosh, he's here. What's a game? Are we really doing this?"
And like he's you can tell everyone's eating and he's just like going, "Really, really," but he's not saying it, but his face is saying it.
Yeah, it's a good scene.
Turning away from the characters, as a production, I think it's a pretty good looking production. What do you?
Yeah, I like the. It's like they filmed for Troy. That was filmed in Bulgaria in a set that's normally used to stand in for New York, according to the special features. And they said they had to remove all the New York paraphernalia just so it looks almost European almost or something, you know, with these kind
I
of...
must admit, whilst I was watching it, whenever I watched Troy, I did think it felt very American. And it did throw me sometimes, because I was like, these roads feel American. I was like, I know it's Britain, and it's in Britain, and it's meant to be in London, and you've got British cars, but I was like, it feels very, very American. So I know what they're saying about how they had to change it, because it felt believable, but it still felt American. Yeah.
Yeah. And the cast was saying in the behind-the-scenes extras how they loved the set. It was, you know, solid, proper buildings and not something you could fall over if you leaned on it, and how all the buildings had full networks of rooms and stuff, and you could just go off exploring and finding stuff.
The directors on the series were Lawrence Goff and Jonathan Van Tullecken. And both experienced TV directors, both before and after. I was interested to find out, actually, that Lawrence Goff directed a couple of Doctor Who episodes.
Oh, which ones?
He directed the pilot and Smile, with starring Peter Capaldi.
And Bill Mackey.
And both very striking episodes, good-looking episodes. Whilst Jonathan Van Tullecken was a veteran of Misfits, amongst
Makes sense.
many other shows. So yeah, the action sequences are well done. All the shootouts, usually kind of quick, brutal affairs. They don't go in for big. It's that trying to keep it realistic, so it's sudden, sharp moments.
Especially with Antoine, Michael Smiley, with the shotgun, it'd just be swing round, bang, done.
That's it. There's a striking moment when he first returns to Troy, and the would-be assassin kind of tries to jump in the car, and he sort of stabs him and throws him out, and then he just goes back to being very calm.
Yeah, and there's the stuff in the factory as well, and when Antoine has to save Lewis, and that's some good stuff going on there, and they're shooting out, and they're getting upstairs to a storeroom, and having to get back out again, and flipping tables and stuff. It's a very good location they used.
Due to low ratings and...
before we go on to that, I just wanted to mention, you know, when we're talking about production, I was just thinking, you know what, it reminds me of when those bits, when the scenes, because to get into Troy, the border, it's going down a tunnel. It reminds me of The City and the City.
Ah, now that's the one I don't know about you, Danny, that's one I've not seen.
Don't even know what it is.
It was a drama with David Morrissey in it about the city that's divided, and
David Morrissey.
Again, to access, legally access the other side of the city, you've got to go down a tunnel, and very similar kind of setup. It looks just like it.
I think I started watching it. I don't think I was in the right mood for it, so I kind of gave up halfway through the first episode.
And in the city, both halves of the city have different colour palettes as well, just like in this case.
Interesting.
So you always know which side you're on.
It's all fascinating. Don't let me stop you. Ultimately, the aliens did not make much of a splash at the time, as we talked about at the top of the episode, and low ratings and seemingly not having any champions at E4 meant it only lasted one season. As now that we've watched it, where we think a second season might have gone. It ends on a partially resolved, but also a bit of a cliffhanger. So I was wondering, have you any thoughts? Where would you have liked if you were sort of overseeing a second season?
If I was overseeing a second season, I would have had the Alien League people, essentially revolt, get the aliens to revolt against the humans and try and get out of that system, because they were trying to change the status quo. They were trying to better themselves and educate themselves and be better and be respected and be treated better. And I feel like it would have been nice to see them try and push that and had a full-on revolution.
Yeah. And it'd have been nice to have found out, if they did a second series, to find out something more about who they were, where they came from. Why did they have an amnesia? Or was it amnesia?
I think that's where I would have liked to have up to the science fiction element of it a little. Not a huge amount. I don't need them to suddenly be producing phasers or other strange alien powers, but it might have been interesting to have discovered a bit more about their origins. And
where's the ship?
That's it. Does the ship exist? I think that would have been an interesting thing if they. I think that could have been a plot if they had found evidence that the ship still existed somewhere, hidden in a British Area 51 somewhere.
Yeah, because in District 9, the South Africans are all like studying all the ship weapons and stuff they got from the ship. Because that's what they're bothered about. It's the weapon technology and things. So imagine surely but it crashed into the sea, and this was 1977, so I don't know how.
It could have been perhaps. In fact, that could be a start. Perhaps they've only just managed to raise it.
I'd like to know if there were like any human campaigners.
That was something I thought was a bit missing. That there was nobody.
Yeah, which I think goes back to my theory on that what you're seeing is through Lewis's eyes. You are seeing the world through his eyes, because you only ever see the human side through his eyes. So it would be nice to see, like, say, other characters and other aspects that we haven't seen, that include, like, say, campaigners from both sides. And see, I'd just like them to have integrated the world better. Like, I don't feel like it was that believable at times. Like, who are they? Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like, we didn't have the history lesson. You know what I mean? Like, some of what Rebecca set out had to be found on her website, which, yeah, when you're watching a TV series...
Well, a lot of people aren't going to look at that. That was the problem with Alien Covenant as well. Because I remember there was stuff in it where it just seemed like plot holes, and afterwards people saying online, oh no, there was like a mini film you had to watch on such and such a website you've never heard of before. And I was so annoyed, I still not watched it. I think I will eventually, but at the time I was just like, I shouldn't have to seek something like that out to understand what's going on in a film in the cinema.
As long as she was still interested in doing it, I think I would still have Lily in it.
Oh,
yeah.
100%.
Well, she's kind of ended up as the top gangster now she's running the show at the end.
Well,
although it did cliffhanger with her, because the Alien League had broke in and were...
Yeah, then she video messages Lewis as if to say, come save me.
And
but again, is that her playing him?
Well, that's the thing, because he's just kind of got that look of, oh, here we go, never ends.
Yeah. It would be interesting to see what her gain was from doing what she was doing there.
Because, of course, with both Fabian and Antoine being killed, that's left a big power vacuum. Another thing was the way, because Lewis was seen when Antoine was back in Troy, everyone was like greeting him and saying hi, all the normal people on the streets, and
they bridged the gap where the government doesn't, and that probably works in the disenfranchised areas, because well, the disenfranchised, they don't feel like the government feels like they care about them. They don't feel part of a community, but that community does care about them and will care about their community.
Because I got that vibe from Antoine that the local people saw him that way, because he wasn't psychotic like Fabian. Like when one of the plot points midway through the series is Fabian's son, who's obviously trying to earn his father's respect, sneaks into Antoine's to kill him, and he gets scared, and Antoine's like, it's okay, we'll take you back home, and he doesn't hurt him or anything. Whereas Fabian would have probably done it if it had been the other way around.
That's it. Fabian is ultimately a bit one-dimensional. All he's got is a big stick, basically. That's how
not just a big stick, as we learn.
Would you like to?
There's aside from as we said before, the aliens look like humans, but they do have one anatomical difference. They have very large phalluses, which, being Channel 4, it's not going to shy away from showing that to you in the final episode.
That's
it's Channel 4.
I
Channel
don't
4.
think I have anything to add to that.
No.
Really.
And on that bombshell.
Yeah, that's it. So, I think we've come to our final thoughts. Would you like to begin, Danny?
Yeah, I enjoyed the series. I wish they'd done another one.
Yeah.
I do feel like they lacked in I'm going to call it world building. They did lack on the world building front. We didn't get enough of the history. We didn't get what made them different, really. Why are they so similar to humans? Like I said, the culturally the same, the behaviourally the same. It's just like, well, let's make them different. Was it on purpose so that it makes people think that because it was talking about the refugee crisis.
Yeah.
And it's meant to be a parallel to that, perhaps, but at the same time it could have been maybe done a bit better. But I did still enjoy it, and I am saddened that they didn't do a second series, because I would like to have seen where they would have taken it.
Yeah. So I'd like to have seen how Lewis's story would have developed, and with Holly as well, because she, I felt like that was unresolved. We don't know what's happening to her. And last time we saw her, she was shouting at the dad, Niall. And she also dropped that bombshell saying your son's a half Mork. And obviously he didn't know, and he's very prejudiced, so we haven't really seen where that's gone. So there's obviously that stuff to go into.
Yes, that is an unresolved point. It would have been definitely picked up. Yes, and I think it is a worthwhile series. I would have liked more of the Alien. If it's a series called The Aliens, I think it should have played to that a bit more and had a little bit more, as you say, that world building part of it. But as a comedy thriller set in the world of gangsters and lowlifes, it works very well. I've not kept a list of all the quotes, but it's often quite a funny series, and it's that kind of droll British black humour. Very well played by everybody. And yes, I think a second season might have matured it into, and it might well have found its audience.
Again with the audience thing, because in the behind the scenes extra, they're talking about it being a crime drama without the procedural aspects of it, but that does not come across in the promos at all.
I wouldn't even say it comes across in the series. I wouldn't class it as
I'd never think. It didn't occur to me till that feature came up that it was a crime drama at all.
Like, don't get me wrong, it's gangsters, and there's drugs and drug dealing and things like that, and yes, there's crime. I mean, there's even a part where there's like a hitman as well. Fair enough to all that, and it is crime, but not one iota that makes me think it's a crime drama.
I want to thank Danny Ray and Rebecca Ray for joining me today to talk about the Aliens, and thank you for all your insights. And I'm curious to know about what's going to be your next projects now that the Tripods cast has wrapped.
We are going to be doing a new podcast.
Yep.
Accumulated. I don't know. That's the word I'm looking for. Accumulated from. I said something in an episode, and it was I don't do sci-fi, which. Sorry, sci-fi people. But that's the point. The point's going to be that I get barraged with lots of sci-fi films, TV shows, books, video games. It'll be my reactions on them, but also with other people defending them. So.
Yes, we'll have guests occasionally, and I'll also have some surprises in mind for John as well. Some sci-fi he will have encountered, because he's not really aware of the world of sci-fi in the realm of video games. Yeah, so speaking of John, John is for those who haven't listened to Tripodcast, he's our co-host on Tripodcast, and he's guested a few times on Gareth's podcast.
You might well have heard him talking about The Nightmare Man and Outcasts.
Yeah, so I've got some surprises for John as well. So it's partly inspired by podcasts like Never Watched Trek and blogs like Adventures with the Wife in Space, where you've got people who've never watched Doctor Who before or Star Trek, and getting them to watch it and see what the reactions are. And I just find that kind of thing interesting, getting perspectives from people who aren't necessarily in a part of that kind of community.
That sounds excellent. And I shall be putting a link to the Tripods cast at the bottom of the notes for this episode as well. And it's well recommended.
Thank you, Gareth. And thank you for having us on the show.
Yes, thank you very much.
If you'd like to find out more about the Aliens or this podcast, you can follow the link to our website, find us on our Facebook page, or on Twitter at FuturesVery. If you have thoughts about the Aliens, or you'd like to suggest future programmes for us to cover, you can also email us at verybritishfutures@gmail.com. Don't forget, we also have an affiliate page on bookshop.org with listings of books about what we discuss or which have been written by guests. Thank you for listening. Until next time, from
Rebecca Ray.
Danny Ray.
and myself, it's goodbye. Very British Futures is hosted and produced by Gareth Preston, with thanks to Kevin Hiley for technical help. Music by Chattery Art. You can hear more of his music at chatteryart.bandcamp.com.